Hey guys, just back with another coding tutorial. So today we'll be continuing with the C# tutorials. So I have Writer open, so we'll just continue with another lab focusing on nested if and else with some strings. So we'll just start actually with we'll start with a GUI, just with the drag and drop for now. And then we'll try to code the event handler. Oh, I forgot to click that because it says project references are missing, so I have to rebuild solution or something. So I just click that. Should take a second. Sorry about that. If you're bored, you can check out the. I have like a playlist of other YouTubers' music, or like their music of other people. Just like coding music. Yeah, so there's a playlist on my channel if you're interested in that. There'll be all kinds of music in there eventually. Whether you like electronic, hip hop, rap, rock, whatever. Maybe some old tunes in there too. We'll probably just try to mix it up. Okay, so now we have we'll basically just have a pretty simple form here, nothing too complicated. So we'll have one text box and 3 labels and 2 buttons. Pretty much the same layout that we always do. So I'm just going to click the toolbox and then double click. I don't know if you have to double click, maybe just once. Select this, I guess this is a list here, or something. Okay, so just double click or click the text box and then click on the form. The text box should appear if you're using Writer at least. Okay, so now just probably place that. Maybe just the window's just a bit too big. That should be fine. Okay, so just somewhere around there, doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, so let's change the identifier name to test score text box. And we'll go for the font size to something bigger, like 36. Kind of want to throw the shades on. Just to reduce the strain of my eye, I'll probably throw some sunglasses on. Alright, so we have one text box here. We'll just throw another, so we'll put a label here underneath. Let's try to make it about the same size. We'll learn how to code all the length and widths, coordinates and all that placement on the actual layout and all that, so we'll be getting into that later on. We just have to go through the C# concepts before we kind of move forward with GUI design, because it's not going to make sense. We also have to cover objects before that too. So for this one, I'll change the identifier to grade label. And then we'll change the font size to 36 again. Alright, so let's then turn auto size to true. Text, we'll just change that to some spaces just to make the blank kind of label look. Actually, we don't even need to do that. Actually, I think we don't need to do that. Can we just erase everything in here? No, okay, that's not gonna work. Okay, sorry about that. So let's just put some spaces in there. It doesn't have to be perfect, so just for the purpose of learning the if-else nested structures. So we'll just copy that. Actually, maybe just try to, whatever, that's fine. The font's gonna be just too big. So let's add a, what happened to our, okay, so let's add a border style to that. To fix single, I guess. And let's go for copy and paste, so we'll just copy, Control C, paste one there. Paste one here as well. Okay, just something like that's fine. So then we'll just put these two don't need identifiers, so we'll just change the text property. So we'll say enter your name. Sorry, enter your test score. Or enter test score for the first one at the top. So enter test score. I'll just move that over. Then this one will be your grade. Then we'll have two buttons on the bottom. Let's just go with the manual size on that for now. We'll choose a size in a sec. So this we'll just call it, we'll call it determine grade button. Could have just called it grade button, that's fine. So then now we'll have auto size. Whoops. Auto size set to true, and then we'll change the font size to something bigger. Probably might be too big. So then here we'll just say grade. We'll just copy and paste for the second one. We'll go for the identifier, we'll change that to exit button. Sorry, so then this one we'll change the text property to exit. Alright, so that should be fine. This should be okay. Great, exit. Exit button. Yeah, that's fine. Alright, so just take a second here before we get into the event handlers. Alright, so let's start with the event handlers. that should be fine. Let's just save that. So then we'll just scroll down to, sorry, not scroll down. So we'll just determine create button, so we'll just double click that to generate the start of the event handler. I'll just comment out the exception. Okay, so let's start with a try block here. So we'll have a double test score. So then we'll say test score so test score here points to double dot parse test score text box dot text. So test score points to double dot parse text test score text box dot text. So we're just passing once again. We're passing this string property, or this string, which is, sorry, this test score text box dot text, which is a string. So we're passing this string into a double, or as a double. That's how I remember it. So then we're saying, okay, after all that, test score points to this string being passed as a double. Okay, so after that, we'll start at ifs here. So we'll say if test score is less than 60, do we have a grade label here? We don't, okay. Actually we do, don't we? No. Okay, so we had a grade label. Actually, didn't we have one grade label? Yeah, we do have a grade label. Okay, so we have a grade label on our in our GUI, which would be this one, I think. Would have been nice to just define these objects ourselves, which we'll be getting into. So we can just call that, since we dropped it onto the drag and drop, it's kind of been defined. So we can say grade label. Whoops, where am I typing? Grade label dot text is going to point to a character, but I think there isn't, but we can just use a string in that case. Actually, there might be. I don't really use the character key. I don't really use the character type. I hardly ever use it. If it is, okay, perhaps it needs single. I'm wondering if that will work. 31, 31, 31. Okay, so there might be a character type. I hardly ever use it, to be honest. I usually just use strings because strings are For example, C programming doesn't have strings or characters. You need to use, actually they do have, well, they have character arrays, there's no strings. But I prefer just to use strings. If there is strings, you can just have a string with one character. Characters might be, well, they usually are put into single quotes. We'll get into more types later on if we need them. But if you need to use a character, you might be able to. I would just recommend using a string if you really need to. Just go for a string. You can just, and the only change you have to do is tag on double quotes for the literal. In that case, this is easier because if you really need to, you can just change this to more characters if you need them, right? Whatever. So I just prefer to stick with the string. That works fine. But pretty much this is just a character. You could probably just use a character here if you can. So we'll talk about that later on if we need to. So we have grade label.text points to, basically it's an F apparently. It's kind of rough. In the school I was at, well, in my school in Arizona, we had F was below 50. Well, it was an E. They called it an E. But in my school in British Columbia, Canada, we have you have to get above 60 to pass the course. So technically, it's a F if you get below 60, which is kind of hard, to be honest. You kind of have to take less classes. Alright, so anyways, let's just continue on with that. So we have so then if we have if underneath, again, to tag on the else clause, is just going to go underneath the if block. So here we'll say, okay, so else and then if. We could also do else if. We'll talk about that later on if we need to, which is the same thing as this pretty much, but it's kind of just easier to do. Actually, no, you know what? Actually, yeah, I think it is the same. It should be the same, but we'll talk about that later on. So we'll say if test score points to, or is less than 60. Not 60, sorry, 80. We'll say grade label.text points to a C. Alright, so grade label.text points to a C. Underneath that, we'll have an else. So this is going to get a lot of different conditionals here. So else, and then if test score is less than 90, we can say grade label.text points to a B. Underneath we'll have an else with no if, so then grade label.text points to an A. Big A. Alright. So if you look at the conditionals, it's kind of branched out like a tree. Again, you want to try to reduce the amount of conditional statements, the nests at least in conditionals, to a minimum to keep the code running smooth and easy to read. You really don't want to be far way out back to the right side here. Like you don't want to be way out, all the way out here with conditionals. Like, just imagine that just went for a long time. You don't want to be out there because the code can get too tricky. you may have to be out there, but you want to try to reduce the kind of branching, the nests and all that. You want to try to reduce it to the most simplest code possible, just because if you get out there, it's going to be really confusing. If you have an error or a bug or something, like it could take you weeks to fix that if you have something like that. Especially if you have like a really large code, like 100,000 lines or something, or like maybe double that, or you know, a million lines of code, like something like a massive. Maybe like if you're working on, well, I guess obviously you're not going to be working on a code like Facebook by yourself, but if you're working for a team for some kind of company, you don't want if you're running code for a team that another team is going to look at later on, you really want to keep it as simple as possible, just because obviously reading other people's code can be difficult and you don't want to. When you want to read code, you're going to want to read your own code. When you try to read someone else's code, it's kind of confusing. You're like, well, what did they do? I don't know what they did. Basically, you have to run it through the debugger and step through step by step, like how I do in most tutorials, like not in C#, but my other languages. Actually, maybe let's try that today. So I think that's it. So we'll just catch an exception down here. Let's try to set a breakpoint here today. I'm not sure if it's gonna work though, because you kinda have to click and all that. Let's just try to set some. What is that? Where can I set one? Set one here. Can I set one here? Nope. Probably at the first variable. I can set one there. Actually, I don't want to set one there. Not there, because we haven't really gone into this part yet. Which we will. Maybe around here. Here, if I can. Let's just go for that if we can. So these things are called breakpoints. You set them to where you want to stop the code and kind of start, kind of like they call it walk forward, I guess. You can step through slowly and line by line watch the memory and variables change, so that's what we want to do if we can. It's kind of harder to do in GUI, because usually it's kind of based on clicking and stuff, like typing stuff and all that, and the user interactions. Anyways, let's just finish up this catch here, so I'm just going to see where that bracket is. Okay, it's over here. So we'll have a catch here. Excuse me. Exception. So we'll catch exception. Excuse me. So then we'll say message box dot show, and then we'll pass in message dot. Oops, sorry. Exception dot message. Almost exactly like Java, pretty much. I think Java is, yeah, just the same, but it's an M like this. And there might be parentheses on the end of that. But that's fine. That's Java, so this is C#, so it's a bit different. Sorry, let me just have a sip of my water here. Alright, so that should be fine. I don't think we're really going to run this code just for the purpose of demonstrating. You could enter something there, it'll calculate it for you. Grade label kind of got I don't think it should be set to grade label. But in any case, this was just for the purpose of demonstrating this if else block. You can run the code and it should be similar. Actually, you know what? We said we are going to debug this. Okay. In that case, why is grade label set to that? Okay, so let's, I guess exit's not going to have anything. We could just do that, so let's just double click that button. Exit button, let's just call this dot close. That should be fine. Breakpoints there, okay, let's just save that. Problems. Nothing. Okay, good. So how to check your errors, you just go down, at least in Writer, one of these tabs should say problems. You might also see a run maybe in VS Code, so just check that or run. Basically you can check if there's any errors. Right now these are just warnings. Localizable string. F. Okay, I think they're saying you could maybe use a variable for those. Maybe you could use constants. That works fine. We're just setting it to a random string, which is just probably should be actually less memory with that, because you don't need to store a variable to hold those values. Yeah, should be a little bit less. Maybe not, but that's okay. So seems like it would be. I think I messed something up here. Did I mess something up here? Yeah, I think I did. Great. Let's try that. Alright, so let's, that should be fine. Let me just double check that. That can happen sometimes. Imagine having blocks way out there and that happens. You'll be like, oh, what happened? Take you a while to figure it out. Okay, so we have our try block here, catch, if, else should be this whole block. So if less than 60, F else. Okay, so else, then test scores. I feel like I missed 70. Yeah, I did miss 70. Great. Let's just go with this. This is gonna get too confusing. I'll have to recode this whole thing. Actually, could I just squeeze it in here? Let's just try it. This can happen too if you have too many conditionals. So we'll have else if test score is less than 70. Then here we'll say, okay, we'll grade label.text points to the string D, capital D. Okay, so if, then maybe I could just branch an else here. Okay, this is going to be a big else, isn't it? Okay, so it seems to have, Writer has fixed that whole thing. Let me just, give me a second to check that. Alright, so let's, sorry, let me just check this here. So test score, if test score is less than 60. So if test score is less than 60, we have this, grade label.text points to F, else, which should be spanning the whole rest of the conditionals. Okay, that's right. Then an if test score is less than 70, grade label.text points to D. Then an else, which should span most of the block except for one else, or something. Yeah, that's correct. Then if test score is less than 80, grade label.text points to C. Else, if test score is less than 90, grade label.text points to B. Else. Okay, that's correct. So it can get a little tricky, especially if you make a mistake. And if you don't have like an auto formatter, like what happened, it kind of auto formatted it for us. If you had that turned off, which I probably would usually have it turned off, it could mess you up. Sometimes I guess it's good to have it turned on, but if it's for studying purposes, you'd want to keep it off just so you can learn how to fix that stuff yourself. And often Writer and maybe VS Code will try to start writing the code for you, like it'll try to write the catch blocks for you. I usually like to turn that off so you can get the practice of doing it yourself. Okay, so anyways, we have the breakpoints here. I'll just check if that works. I'm just gonna run it. Oops, alright, so enter test score, let's just go with 90. A, exit, okay, perfect, so that works fine. Let's go with, I'm gonna click the debug icon this time. Debug, okay. You have to also click the debug tab, looks like it didn't automatically go there. I'm not sure what happened there, to be honest. So I'm just going to enter 90 and hit grade. Okay. Okay, so we do have something here. Okay, so that's good. Let's try that. Some of it was skipped, as you can see. So this is our thread here. We've got some different stuff in here. It's a little bit more complicated than your normal, actually, well, it's similar. So we have our form here, determine grade. So it's saying, okay, well, we're in the form. We're in this form 1 here. Sorry, not form, yeah, actually we are in form 1. In the namespace, Windows Forms app 15. Basically it's saying, okay, well we have then, we have a control button, which will skip these. So let's just focus on this form 1. We'll focus on the main thread. We won't be worrying about too much about these right now. So let's just focus on this one. Okay, so then we have some buttons here. We have, hopefully you guys can see this. So we have some buttons here. If you haven't seen these before, if you haven't watched my other tutorials, they're the same buttons, pretty much. So this is a bit different. You can return to Windows Forms app 15. You can stop the debugger. You can resume the program, pause, step over. So these are the buttons that we're going to be using here. Step over. What's this one? Step into, step out. Did they mix these up? I think they did. So in this case, we're going to step in. So I'm going to click the step into button. Okay, before we do that, sorry, let's just go back to where we were a second ago. Alright, so let's expand this arrow here on that this. Okay, so we got a lot of stuff here. It's quite complicated, to be honest. This is everything to do with the form itself, which has a lot of built-in stuff that we did not talk about. We didn't talk about a lot of it, because it's just something that's automatically in the back, kind of in the machine code stuff. No, well, not even that. It's something. It's in the code with when Microsoft creates that form itself, it has its own variables and all that, which we don't see unless we're here, I guess. So these are things we don't really have to focus on. We'll be learning how to do that stuff ourselves. We're gonna, the form itself has a lot of built-in things. As you can see, there's tons and tons of objects and variables to do with the form, the default form itself. For example, for one thing, we can see that the windows, the size either is these ones or this one. It's a little bit tricky. So yeah, it's a little bit tricky here. There's a lot of stuff. Well, this is very advanced for that default form code. So I guess they've included the default form code variable, so you can see with this references a form one. Mouse event will have its own code for how the mouse runs. Sender, which we talked about, of course that's in our event handler, one of the parameters, which we haven't really discussed too much. We don't need to worry about that right now. There's even more parameters there, about the same amount as form. So right now we just have test score. Where are we now? We're here. Okay. Right now we just have test score set to 0. So let's just step in again. So we were there. Now test score is set to 0. I guess it already was. Perhaps at run time or compile time, those variables are set to 0. So now it's saying, okay, well, test score points to double.parse test score text box. So if I step in, I don't think anything's going to change. The reason why is because it's waiting for something to be entered. So right now it's saying, okay, well, test score points to double.parse test score text box.text. So it's saying, okay, well, I'm waiting for you to enter something.